Hello and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its history and what it's like to fight in-game as well. Now these videos are based on your suggestions, which you leave me down in the comment section below, of monsters that you'd like to see me draw or hear me talk about, hear me explore the lore of. So if at any point during this video you suddenly think of a creature that you really want to see me draw, make sure to leave it down below in the comment section, because I gather up every single one of your suggestions and I add them to what's called my to-draw list. And then every month I hand that to-draw list over to my patrons over on Patreon, who get a chance to vote on which monsters they'd like to see next. Now, it doesn't matter whether you back me at the price of a cup of tea every single month, all the way up to the very, very highest levels in Patreon. Everybody gets an equal share in this voting. They get an equal voting opportunity, let's say. So if that sounds good to you, if that sounds like something you want to participate in, if you want more control over the types of videos that you see from me, the monsters that you see in what order, then I'll make sure to leave a link down below in my description box that leads to my Patreon page, so you can contribute if you want to, if you can help to support this channel and grow this channel if you want to. Otherwise, make sure to leave a suggestion for a monster down in the comment section below. Which reminds me that one of you guys suggested today's monster. Today we are going to be exploring the Devious the Vile Hag. And this monster was first suggested by Sweeps, absolutely ages and ages ago. So I'm glad I'm finally getting around to this monster. Thank you for your suggestion, Sweeps. Let's get started with today's video. In D&D, hags are crone or witch-like monsters who either seem to count as fae or perhaps fiends, depending on their type. As of the release of the Eberron supplement for 5th edition, we have 6 different kinds of hags in-game. The classic sort of green hag, the night hag, sea hags, burr hags, and now the dusk hag. Although, just like most creatures with subspecies in D&D, previous editions seem to have been streamlined into these few variations so far in 5th edition. In the past, players have had the chance to fight spectral hags, black hags, shrieking hags, dune hags, bog hags, death hags, pact hags, mist hags, dream hags, and I don't know, probably dozens more that I've never even heard of. In fact, let me know if you're aware of any of these other types of hags in the comment section, especially if you can link some stats to go with them for 5th edition so everyone can use them. Despite all these many variations, 1st edition only made mention of the sea hag in 1975's Blackmore supplement, and players didn't really see stats for these things until 1977 with the release of the Monster Manual, which expanded on the flavours of hags to include night hags as well. The word hag finds its origin in Middle English, where it was shortened from Haigtesse, an Old English word meaning witch. And while the appearance of hags, both in fairy tales and mythology and D&D, seems very much inspired by the stereotypical Halloween green-skinned witch, or the witches in The Wizard of Oz, I've also mentioned in my Baba Yaga video that these visuals are tied to our Slavic grannies depictions. Hags also share a lot of inspiration with the Moirae, 3 fates from ancient Greek mythology. They were 3 spellcasting women who controlled the mother thread of life and fate, who could read its mysterious patterns before it was woven into the tapestry of time, essentially being able to read the future through thread. They were also known by their own individual names: Clotho, she who mastered life, Lachesis, the determiner of destiny, and Atropos, she who reads death. So too, like the Moirae of Greek legend, hags in D&D are universally female spellcasters, fate weavers, and supernatural creatures who gather together in groups of no fewer and no more than 3 to perform their rituals. Unlike the 3 fates, however, hags definitely appear more like Baba Yaga, exemplifying cruelty, burdened with grotesque, over-exaggerated features, usually seeming like very old women as opposed to the young women that the Moirae tended to be depicted as. While all hags have an innate connection to magic, usually they can only cast a few minor spells by themselves. The green hag, for example, can only perform dancing lights, minor illusion, and vicious mockery, only cantrips that any mage or sorcerer with a cursory knowledge of magic could conjure. But when hags group together in their groups of 3, which are called covens, their spellcasting ability is massively increased, usually boosting each member's challenge rating by 2 or more as well. The word for this group, coven, is borrowed from the term for a gathering of pagan worshippers or witches, and is derived from the Anglo-Norman word covent, meaning a gathering, which has also given us words in English like convention, but also consensus, covenant, and things like that, meaning an agreement or a pact within a group, something binding but also something community-based as well. While all 3 members of a coven are within 30 feet of one another, they essentially feed off of each other's magical nature, but also amplify the power of each member individually as well. They get to cast spells up to 6th level, including things like Eye Bite, Phantasmal Killer, Lightning Bolt, Bestow Curse, Hold Person, and Ray of Sickness. And each hag counts as a 12th level spellcaster for the sake of things like counterspells, let's say. The only caveat, the only downside to this massive power boost is that all 3 hags in the coven share the same limited spell slots equally between them. Imagine being in a party with 3 wizards and having to pick who among you gets to use your 6th level spell slot, if you should blow all your 3rd level spell slots on various lightning bolts in one turn, or if you should maybe hold off so that one of you can cast something else useful later on. Naturally, arguments ensue among covens, which is why covens of hags always have to contain 3 hags, so that if a dispute arises, or rather when a dispute inevitably arises between 2 of these creatures, a 3rd can step in and cast a deciding vote. And as such, all covens, despite being made up of hags of various different kinds of wildly varying challenge ratings and power levels, all reluctantly treat each other as equals for the sake of the coven, for the sake of the greater whole, something that really does not come naturally to hags, who are said to be evil personified and who are some of the most greedy and jealous creatures players are likely to encounter in their adventures. But it's this greed that I believe is the key to defeating hags. Their power is dependent on them staying within 30 feet of one another, so if for some reason they can't be physically separated in order to diminish their communal power, it's always a good idea to try and get all 3 hags fighting amongst one another. Naturally, a high charisma score will definitely make this easier, so it's always a good idea to bring a bard with you if you're trying to diffuse an attack from a whole coven of hags. But bitter and twisted communities are nothing like the supportive and caring community that we have growing over on Patreon. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that patrons get to vote which illustrations I do next, which topics I cover, but in exchange for helping me to grow this channel, in exchange for helping to fund these videos, in exchange for letting me do my dream job, which is making these videos for you, I also like to reward my patrons at various other levels. Patrons might get a copy of every single illustration that I do each month. You might have noticed at the end of my videos that quite a lot of my patrons get their names added to the credits at the end of the video as a thank you. Some might get a shout out on all of my social media platforms, and there are also one-on-one chats that we can have where we can just chill out and chat, or we can talk about world building ideas. I can do a bit of drawing for you and things like that. So if you really want to support this community, if you really want to help me make these videos, then I really do appreciate tips. So if you like the idea of voting on these monsters that I draw, what ones should come up next, if you want a bit more control, and you like the sound of these rewards, and you want to say thanks for making these videos, I'll make sure to leave the link to my Patreon page down below. But that was far too wholesome for a video about hags, so let's get back to the grim stuff. The kinds of magics that hags tend to perform are usually the grim and grotesque old magics, the spells and rituals that draw on the power of flesh and blood to sacrifice as spell components. The most notable of these is the creation of what's called a hag eye. Hags often forge an item called a hag eye that allows them to see some distant place. They can spend an action to see through this eye, regardless of its actual physical world location, so long as it remains in the same plane of existence as them, and as such is often placed as a fly on the wall in some discrete location, or otherwise transported and guarded by some minion of the covens. If you're a warlock pact of the Fae, that might be you. The item's effects are permanent, but it requires a real eye to be plucked from a still living creature in order to create it. The hag eye functions for as long as the donor still lives and can be destroyed, which causes a psychic feedback loop that deals 3d10 damage to each hag that created it. It also blinds them for 24 hours, granting players a major advantage if they plan to hunt down that insidious creature, or in fact fact the whole coven. And although that is grotesque, it's not where the grotesqueness and horrors of being a hag actually end. In fact, every part of a hag's life is wretched and macabre. They generally enjoy a mixture of rotting and diseased skin, growing boils and gangrene as we might tend to houseplants, and find the appearances of beautiful creatures conversely disgusting, often trying to help them by maybe disfiguring them in some way so as to look more like hags. The nails and teeth of a hag are often filed to points on millstones so as to better tear through flesh, and they consume exclusively carnivorous meals, save for those ingredients harvested from the swamps in which they live and cave systems which might make a good set of ingredients for a potion perhaps. They may sew new clothes from the skin or entrails of their victims and pick at infected sores whose sanguine pus they would use, perhaps, as lipstick. But darkest of all is actually how these creatures reproduce. They are exclusively born of humans. Hags watch for human mothers or mothers-to-be and will snatch their young either by stealing them away in the dead of night or by disemboweling a woman who has yet to give birth, after which they will then devour the infant. Weeks later, the hag will bloat, more like a corpse, distending from exposure to excess water or filling with putrid gases rather than a human pregnancy. Then the creature births a daughter who will look human until their 13th birthday, unlucky 13, at which point they will transform into a hag of the same persuasion as the mother. They delight in the suffering of others, so if the hag has not killed the parents of this child used in this ritual, they will often return the pre-hag to the original parents to let them raise it as their own, watching with malice and glee as the child mutates at age 13. Despite this inherent venom towards other creatures, hags are superstitious and respectful of pacts, bargains, and promises. If a hag encroaches on the territory of another, she will conduct herself respectfully, offering revolting gifts and other strange, gruesome courtesies, even though both hags will likely hate each other, and they must always announce their intention to travel into another hag's territory long in advance. They also delight in making pacts and deals with mortal creatures, offering power, aid, or services which they will absolutely respect to the letter, but their side of the bargain will often be troublesome. They'll often ask in exchange that a creature compromises their principles or their morals so that a hag might feed off of their anguish and suffering in such a decision. If a hag offers you something with no foreseeable price, it's only because they believe that in doing so, their assistance will lead to your downfall in some other convoluted, unforeseen, and tragic way. All hags differ in their abilities, preferences, and appearance. Green hags are attuned to the inherent chaos and uncaringness of nature, dwelling in thick forests or swamps obscured by blankets of putrid fog. They speak common, draconic, and sylvan, can perfectly imitate any voice or animal sound to better disorient, confuse, and terrify travelers, a bit like the black crows that fly alongside them. Their sharpened claws deal 2d8+4 slashing damage, and alongside their ability to cast a few cantrips, their magic is mostly used to cast convincing illusions, allowing her to appear as another creature, although this tends not to stand up to physical inspection. Otherwise, they can turn invisible at will, unless they cast a spell or attack something. Sea hags are immediately emblazoned with anger if they see anything remotely beautiful, and must immediately destroy or vandalize it somehow. As such, they dwell in the inky waters of ocean caves, or the thickly polluted swamps and sulphurous marshlands, whose water obscures them from sight. Their hair is usually some bedraggled mass of seaweed, which clings to their permanently soaking and rubbery skin. Their visage is so revolting to behold that any humanoid that starts their turn within 30 feet of one of these creatures will need to pass a wisdom saving throw to avoid being frightened or perhaps throwing up. Their claws deal 2d6+3 slashing damage, and they, like the green hag, can alter their appearance with magical illusions. They also have a death glare ability, which only works on a creature that is already frightened of her. If frightened, this attack forces a creature to pass another wisdom save, causing them to instantly permanently drop to 0 HP if they fail. Night hags, the creatures that I'm drawing a night hag right now, are perhaps the most innately magically adept of the hag subspecies due to their infernal heritage. Whereas other hags are fey creatures, night hags are fiends, a truth that they boast proudly, sporting curling horns from their heads and glowing eyes filled with the embers of the lower planes. Night hags are likely inspired by an Old English creature called the Meira, or in Scandinavian, the Mara, who would sit on someone's chest as they sleep, leaving them unable to breathe as they suck the life from them, which led to the expression hag-ridden or haggard, meaning exhausted due to not getting a good night's sleep. We now know these legends to be examples of old retellings of the sleep paralysis phenomenon, but although these are merely tormenting hallucinations in real life, the night hag in D&D literally harvests the souls of the living by sitting on their chests as they sleep, and these souls are then used as spell components or as currency in the lower planes. They craft special items which can be taken from these monsters upon their deaths, or by swift and very subtle pickpockets with no fear of repercussions. The first item is their soul bag, stitched together from a humanoid's flesh, often adorned with various faces. This item stores all the souls that a hag draws from her victims. Secondly, she might craft a hearthstone, which funnily enough actually has no relation to the Blizzard card game or the magic item that inspired it in World of Warcraft. This item, crafted from a piece of obsidian or jet, allows a hag to become a ghostly, intangible form, so that as long as she holds it, it allows her to drift through walls and defences. The touch of a hearthstone can also cure any disease, which is how many adventurers actually come to meet their first hag, through a quest to claim one. Dusk hags resemble night hags very closely, even down to the horns and burning eyes. However, as the fiendish night hag tends to have skin of a purple, grey or perhaps navy tone, the dusk hag conversely has more of a palette of the setting sun, infused with rich crimsons, pinks and purples. Dusk hags dream deeply in the magics of divination and can very accurately prophesy the future for anyone willing to listen, but their malicious nature tends to see them only tell captivated mortals of futures in phrases that the hag can foresee will cause them the most misery. They may not tell you the truth, only things that they know will cause you suffering. They may inform someone that their partner is having an affair, not because they know it's true, but because they can foresee that this will cause their victim to return in a fit of rage and murder their partner's lover in jealousy. Perhaps it is their best friend, even if they have caused no real-world slight. They remind me quite a lot of the Cathay in the Kingkiller Chronicles. Dusk hags, unlike the other hags, are unable to shape their appearance. They cast no illusions, and they're unable to polymorph their flesh like a night hag, but their touch curses their victims, dealing 4d6 plus 4 psychic damage to a conscious foe, or 3d6 psychic damage to a sleeping or unconscious victim, which decreases their maximum HP by d10 every time they rest until they die, or until this curse is lifted. If a sleeping victim starts to regain consciousness, a dusk hag can eat their dreams as a reaction, forcing them to make a wisdom saving throw and dealing 2d10 psychic damage if they fail. This also heals the hag for the same amount that they deal. Anise hags are the largest of their kin, towering between 8 to 10 feet and built as strong as ogres with 21 strength. They're the only hags with a multi-attack, relying on their brutality as they claw, bite and crush their foes. Their bone-breaking hugs deal 9d6 bludgeoning damage and grapple opponents who fail to escape. They then continue to grind the bones of their victims in this embrace, dealing 9d6 plus 5 bludgeoning damage at the start of each of the hag's turns until they are released. Despite this brutality, the Anise hag's personality will often come across as the most kindly at first. They delight in shifting their shape into that of a kindly old woman and use their charm to lure unsuspecting children to the coven, or will convince the child to behave violently to those around it. The hag maintains this contact with the child through the creation of iron tokens, which may appear as metal lucky pennies that this shape-shifted granny gives her victim. These tokens are crafted from the iron teeth and nails of the hag and function like sending stones, allowing the hag to whisper murderous secrets to their impressionable sacrifice. Finally, the Bur Hag is arguably the most potent of the hags individually at challenge rating 7. Using their affinity for frost magic, they carry a staff of mistletoe that's ice cold to the touch and functions as both a spellcasting focus as it controls the weather and blasts its foes with cones of cold, but also acts as a broom of flying, so this frozen horror can terrorize its victims from the sky. They're naturally able to stand, run, and climb any difficult surface caused by cold without any difficulty, a feature that they use to accompany starving and suffering mortals who would find themselves traversing unfavourable territory in the freezing regions of the world or during winter. If a creature dies in her vicinity, the hag can devour the corpse, not unlike a Wendigo, causing all those who see this cannibalistic display to take a wisdom saving throw, losing their minds to the horror, causing them to speak only gibberish, and allowing the DM to control their movement until they can grapple with the sights forced upon them and regain their composure. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, guys. If you did, make sure to leave it a little thumbs up, a little like, perhaps favourite this video, and share it with the rest of your community, so hopefully we can build this channel. We can build the little community we have here on the Arcane Forge. Everything you can do like that really helps this channel to grow and helps YouTube to know that I'm doing a good job. So thank you so much if you choose to do that. If there are unspeakable acts of criminal horror going on in your community and you suspect the little old ladies of being at the bottom of it, always make sure to check if their knitting circle only has 3 members, because if they do, you might be dealing with a wicked hag coven. And until next time, happy monster hunting.